Former North Charleston Police Officer Michael Slager will be retried for the murder of Walter Scott last April. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with Walter Scott's brother, Anthony Scott. Mr. Scott, it is so good seeing you.
Good seeing you too.
You know, the last time I saw you was, last month in front of where I used to work, Eli's table?
Exactly.
And since that time, there's a lot of things have changed for you.
Absolutely.
Let me turn to the obvious.
Yes.
March 1st, which will be Judgment Day Part 2. Michael
Yes.
Slager will be retried for the murder of your brother, Walter Scott.
Yes, sir.
And Charleston County Solicitor Scarlett Wilson said the following just today, quote, "As I've said consistently, we will be ready for trial whenever the court calls. Certainly after meeting with several jurors, we are reinvigorated and ready to move forward. The Scott family is anxious for justice, as are we. That said, the elements to the federal charges in the Slager case are a bit simpler than the state charges. So I was pleased that the feds eventually indicted. I hoped that they would be able to bring a speedier trial, but scheduling can get complicated. Judge Norton has been quite sensible and considerate, and I'm appreciative of all his efforts." A couple things stuck out to me. First, she said, quote, "We are reinvigorated and ready to move forward." And I'm wondering, how reinvigorated are you and your family, and how soon are you ready to move forward?
The thoughts of our family have never changed, that this gentleman is guilty of murder. And with that being said, we think with the evidence that any jury would have would be enough evidence to convict him of that. Now, we feel that it's up to the solicitor and her team to make sure that all the evidence is presented in a way to convince those jurors that this man is guilty of murder.
Scarlett Wilson, let me stay on her because she said the following about you guys, quote, "They have not received the credit they deserve in their calm leadership for the community. The Scotts have been a sterling example of dignity and grace in extraordinary circumstances." What credit do you want to give to Solicitor Scarlett Wilson?
In the first trial, I think she did. I'm not going to recant what I said in the beginning of her doing an excellent job, which I still believe that. But to this day, I think there may be a few things that may need to be drilled a little bit harder to convince these jurors that without a reasonable doubt that this man is guilty of murder. And one of those things being Michael Slager dropping at the taser. I think that should be a little bit more emphasis put on that particular thing. Why? Because that was a cover-up of evidence, a planting of evidence. And if you're not guilty of something, there's no reason for you to have to plant evidence in a case. So I think that may be one thing that need to be drilled on a little bit more and brought out and touched on a little bit more. And not only that, but his lying in his testimony. When we catch him in the lies in his testimony, you can remember certain things that happened in the case, but other things that happened that same day, you cannot remember. As Slager would say, he had spaghetti mind. And how do you have a spaghetti mind with some situations in the case, but other things you are so precise and have details about? I think that's a situation, and I think that is an issue. I think those things need to be addressed.
You talk about Slager. I remember I was at the press conference the day of the mistrial declaration, and you basically said this: he gets to spend Christmas with his family. I'm curious, what was Christmas like in the Scott family household?
Actually, me and the wife spent it with our granddaughter, and it was the three of us, and that's how we spent it together. And you know, my mom and them, they did their own thing. They did a different thing, but Christmas is definitely different. And most times we're out of town anyway. We travel most of the time because my wife is not from Charlotte. I mean, from Charleston. She's from Charlotte.
Okay.
So most of the time we're not here anyway. But we had a nice private quiet Christmas, and it was still good.
You talk about your mom. As we sit here right now, what is it like to be Judy Scott, Walter Scott's mother?
Our son,
Yeah,
their son.
right.
I, from a very young age, I felt highly of them, and my parents, they were the type of parents that would take a little and make a lot. They always trusted in God. They were always faithful people. They kept me and my brothers in church. And it's in our upbringing, it's in our blood. And there were times when I was very upset about being in church so many times, and all the time, Wednesday, Friday night, Sunday,
Right.
Sunday afternoon,
Yes.
all those times.
Yeah.
But it was all for the making of us, to get us ready for this time that we're going through now.
You talk about, God obviously and being faithful towards Him. Let me ask you this. What scripture are you reading right now?
I've been reading the Psalms, but and I haven't been reading too many scriptures. I've been relying on the word that's already implanted in my heart and in my soul. And the word that's already been inside of me, already implanted in me, that's what I've been being faithful on and trusting in.
Let me turn to Dorsey Montgomery. Obviously, I first saw him on the Today Show, I guess, the day after the mistrial declaration. And at the time, he, addressed himself as the jury foreman. And I believe a couple of hours afterwards, he made headline news because he had some criminal issues prior to the trial or during the trial.
Absolutely.
When you think of Dorsey Montgomery, what sticks out to you?
One thing, the first thing that sticks out to me, he was the only black person on the jury, number one. I trust the judgment of Judge Newman.
Right.
I think Judge Newman did an excellent job. Judge Newman appointing him as the head juror, I thought was a good idea. Now, at this time, we had no knowledge of the situations that he had been involved in. But I think there are other jurors that had passes as well. And do I think that played a part in the judgment? I don't think so. I don't think that played a part in the judgment. What I think played a part in the judgment is them not looking at them not believing what their eyes saw.
What do you think their eyes did see?
I can't say what their eyes saw,
Okay.
but I know what my eyes saw. I saw a man running away, being shot in his back, posing no threat to a police officer. Because after you ran away and you're 17 feet away, even if you had something in your hand, even if you had a weapon, your back is turned and you're running away. It doesn't matter what you were thinking at that time. Backup was on the way, help was on the way. You could hear the sirens in the background. You could hear them in the background. But this officer chose to be God, jury, and judgment in his own hands. And he thought he was going to get away with this murder. Officer Slager thought he was not being filmed. He had no idea he was being filmed. And based on everything that we saw with our own eyes, based on the film which we saw, this man, all those intentions led to that same thing. I'm not being seen. I'm going to kill him. And that's what he did.
You talk about the filming in the video. Obviously, we know about Peyton Santana.
Absolutely.
When you think of him from really April of last year to right now, what plays in your mind when you think of him?
You know, I still fear for him, and I fear for him because there are some bad elements in our society, and there are people that's not happy with his decision to film that video, even though we know of the corruption that happens in North Charleston. That's where he lived.
Right.
But this young man feared for his life from that day until this day.
Oh.
And with you fearing for your life that way, I'm almost, I couldn't imagine being in that situation mentally,
Right.
physically, nor spiritually.
Right.
Couldn't even imagine that.
I forgot to ask you this earlier, but I remember this too. Yeah, and you definitely remember this. But those days, Friday to Monday, when the jury was stuck on whether it was fair and passion. I'm wondering, what's your definition of fair and passion?
My definition of fear and passion? Well, I'll say this.
Okay.
As far as fear and passion is concerned, as far as I'm concerned,
Okay.
I feel that that officer had no fear. And when they make that an element as far as deciding whether this was murder or not, I almost think those things can be eliminated. The fear and the passion part can be eliminated. What did you see? And what I saw was my brother running away. I didn't see any fear. When this man pulled the trigger, I saw passion to murder, to kill him. Now, if these jurors cannot see that, and so many other people in this world can see that, I don't know what else has to, then we're going to have to leave it in the hands of God.
Wow. Speaking of which, what are you praying about now? Obviously, the retrial is coming up in April, and then, of course, the federal trial in May. What are you praying to God for now?
The prayer hasn't changed.
Mm.
The prayer is still the same, and even though we got the verdict that we got in the first trial, our prayer is still justice for Walter Scott, and that Slager would spend the rest of his life in jail for murder, and that hasn't changed. And that is what I desire of the state. That is what I desire of the federal. I desire that on both sides, but I would really pray to God that this will be over on the second time around on the state side. And we don't even have to go to the federal side. We're tired. We are tired. We haven't recuperated. And we need a good vacation. But that hasn't happened yet. And with the news, which we just learned of yesterday,
Right.
that is coming up in March, we're like, wow.
All over again.
All over again. And it was a long process. It was a long 5.5 weeks. But if that's what it takes for us to get justice for Walter, that's what the family desires to have.
Anthony Scott, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
You're welcome.
Thank you.